Okay, we'll see how this goes. So I mounted this Insta360 X3 onto my bike, onto the selfie stick, and I wanted to see how it would do. Also, audio quality, I'm really close to the microphone, so I imagine it would be pretty good. Right now we have it in stereo. I also have a lavalier mic hooked up to a dead cat for wind mitigation. But I think part of having something like this particular camera on here is really cool because you get to show like you get to shoot once and then essentially reframe it later. But if you're just shooting for a GoPro shot, it's tough to say that this would be worth it. I noticed that the selfie stick is pretty sketchy, so I'm gonna be pretty cautious in terms of riding. But I guess the nice thing about this is that you can extend the selfie stick. So we'll do that right now. And then you can sort of get this interesting, the selfie stick is so sketchy, so I don't know how it's gonna actually look. Thank you. I think that scared the shit out of the person. But yeah, it's supposed to give you this, Marquez Brownlee put it like the best way, this GTA shot where it's sort of above you. This is gonna run into a couple of tree branches. But I'm also gonna switch it to the different audio modes because there's directional. So there are 3 microphones is what it looks like. I also use, like, there's different modes in terms of color, so you can use standard, vivid, and raw, which obvious, like, I don't want to say obvious, some people don't use these cameras, but GoPros are essentially like the most vivid and oversaturated picture. So there's like a GoPro picture profile, and then for this, vivid is similar to that. Standard is more like your flat profile, or not flat profile, but I guess you would say, I'm gonna lower this because I keep hitting branches and it just looks ridiculous. So now you're looking straight at me, so that's probably weird too. So yeah, there's also a log, so I can switch through those right now. Okay, so this is standard, and sharpness is also on low because it's, I guess, digital sharpening. So there's low, medium, high, and highest. And let's switch out to, okay, and this is log, so you can see, you can probably see like more dynamic range when you have logs, so you can see just more artifacts and more shadows and what have you. So this gives you the ability to actually change, you know, if you want to add more color to what you're looking at. So we're going to stay in vivid for right now. Okay, and this is log, so you can see, you can probably see like more dynamic range when you have logs, so you can see just more artifacts and more shadows and what have you. So we are currently recording in 5.7K 30 frames per second, and you can switch this to 4K 60 frames per second, which is pretty cool. But the problem with that is the 5.7K is the entire video, so thank you. So when you look at 5.7K, it's both of the actual cameras. So it has a lens on both of the sides. And something that I noticed was that it seems very easy to scratch this. So, and that could also be on purpose too. It's just the lenses are bulging out. Seems very easy to scratch them. I haven't scratched it yet, but I've only had a week with this thing, so I imagine longer term, even though with my GoPro, haven't had really any issues at all. But something to also note is that you can shoot in 4K up to 30 frames per second on a single lens.
When you switch into the single lens, it acts similarly to a GoPro or anything to that degree, where it's just taking video out of one side or the other. And something that's nice is that you can actually use this to switch back and forth between the lenses. So you can see here, but something that I noticed is that, as you can see as I swipe, there's a delay in the screen. And I'm not entirely sure why this is the case, because when you're in, and it's on both sides too, so like here, swipe, swipe, and so you can see I'm swiping down, the delay, so I swipe down, and then it swipes down in the actual screen. So I'm not entirely sure why this is the case. It doesn't do this when I'm in the 360 mode. So let me switch to the 360 mode here. And okay, so you can see me, right? Down. So there's no delay when I'm in the 5.7K, 30 frames per second mode. So I don't really know why that is the case. It's really kind of an odd quirk that you would assume would be a function that would work. Like it should, if anything worked, that should work, because it's a very odd thing for the single lens. If it's just recording on one lens, why it wouldn't be able to do that. But yeah, it's some odd bug with this software. I can't imagine that it's a hardware issue, because as I mentioned, I was in the 5.7K 360 cam and it doesn't have that particular issue. I'm not really sure why this is happening for this, but yeah, that's something that I noticed with this particular Insta360 X3. Okay, something that I also noticed with this is that on the screen, when you're trying to, there's a couple ways to actually use the audio. One thing that I noticed is that there's a setting for AirPods. So you can see here in the settings, there's AirPods, right? And this is so that you can connect to a Bluetooth device and you can use the audio streaming from the Bluetooth device to this. So I have AirPods Pro first generation and AirPods Pro Gen 2. And none of these, neither of these AirPods Pro can connect to this Bluetooth and stream audio to it with this. So I've also, taken this out, put it in pairing mode. So you hold this down and then wait till it glows glows white and is blinking. So I've done this multiple times and just had it like syncing right next to it, and no devices, as you can see, no devices. So I don't I don't really know why the pairing doesn't work with the AirPods Pro, even though it's literally saying, hey, AirPods. So I have been able to connect it with the Jabra Steel, which I have a video on. Check in the link description, and I'll put in a card right up here. And I was able to connect to it, but the audio is delayed and it's not, the connection doesn't work very well. So that's something to note, is that if you do want to connect via Bluetooth and use the audio via the Bluetooth, don't do it, because the audio is terrible. So it might be something that Insta360 is able to work out in a firmware updates. I imagine, like, if they update anything, they would allow it to be able to connect to AirPods, or at least change it to like Bluetooth or something like that, or Bluetooth audio, because that's very odd that you mentioned, I mean, these aren't the AirPods, but they're the AirPods Pro. So maybe that's a distinguishing thing where it can't connect to that. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure why it can connect to the Jabra Steel, but it cannot connect to the AirPods Pro. So interesting thing, but just another thing that is like sort of a quirk or like a feature that doesn't currently work. Something that is nice is that you can have like a tally light. So if you hit record here, it'll show you recording on this side here. So, and you can see the red blinking here. And then on this side, you can also see the red blinking here. So that's something that's really nice when you're recording, is that it does have the tally light. What I did notice is that it has a delay from when you click record, and also it does have a delay since it can only record up to 30-minute clips or 29.97 second clips. And I guess it does have a 15-second delay for when it creates the other clip. I don't know how I would handle this, because if it's doing that because of overheating issues, but I would imagine, like, you know, if you're recording 30 minutes, you probably want to record a little bit over that. So that's something that maybe Insta360 can fix. I'm sure they're doing that specifically for overheating issues. If you are recording, it will record after that 30-minute clip, but there will be a 15-second gap between when the clip saves and then when it starts recording the next clip. So something to take note of is if you're wanting to do continuous recording, it does have that limitation.
I imagine shooting and recording both at the same time, it's tough on the camera. So on something in a small form factor like this, we're on wind noise reduction, and now we're on a trail, so this will give us a little bit. And let me extend this out because there's not really any people here. So all right, so this is the selfie stick fully extended, and I'm gonna probably, I don't know if this thing's gonna break or not, but probably gonna hold it a little bit, make it a little bit steadier. And here's where we can really test like when flow state stabilization, which is Insta360's like stabilization. So all of it is done through digitally. So it's super cool what it can do here. But this is the view that you can get when you're just riding, have this selfie stick fully extended. I imagine the one that it comes with is a little bit better, but what I did notice is that even with this selfie stick here, whoo, getting a little hairy sandy here. With this selfie stick, it actually does a pretty good job of getting rid of it, with the exception of the little adapter for the GoPro that you see right here. So that's kind of annoying, but yeah, it's not too bad. And it does a pretty good job of actually taking all of that out. So the only thing that you can't get rid of is the shadow, obviously. So there's that. So this is what that looks like when you're biking, and it's pretty bumpy. There's suspension on this bike, so it's not too bad. So again, the perk of this is you shoot once, you record, and if you need to reframe, you can reframe. It does have functionality for you to edit the actual picture or the video or what have you on your phone, which is super cool. Now, when you export from your phone, you won't get the best quality. You can only export 1080p, and I think up to 50 megabits in terms of quality. And on the desktop, you can export really whatever resolution you want, but it natively exports 1080 at, I think, 100 megabits. That's something to take note of. I was able to change it to 200 megabits and also export at 4K. So you can change that resolution to really whatever you want, but natively that's not what it supports. About the app, so overall the deep tracking is pretty cool in that if I just want to track my face, I can circle or put a square or whatever over my face and it can track me. So that's super cool, but using keyframes to actually switch the focus is a bit tedious, and honestly it's kind of a pain in the butt. And and selfie stick gave out on that fall. Overall, I think it's really tough because there's not really a good way to edit it natively. And people talk about like, oh, it's easy to redo focus and so on and so forth. But I think for longer videos when you're scrubbing through, it's kind of tough. So we'll leave it at that. I don't really particularly like it. Yeah, I think it's pretty disruptive on what you can do with the actual with the editing software. I mean, it's not bad, but you can't do like very specific things. Like it's pretty tough to zoom in and switch. The keyframe switching from one to the other isn't super smooth. It's tough to say. I think if you're looking for for an action camera, it sort of is a no-brainer to buy this because you get the best of both worlds. You get a 360 camera, but you can use it solely with a single lens. So let me switch it over here. So I can switch it over here and do a single lens on me. And I also noticed that the screen is pretty laggy, so that's also something that's an issue with this. And one of the reasons why you may not want to get this, but you can shoot in 4K 30 frames per second, but if you want to shoot 4K or you want to shoot 60 frames per second, you have to go downgrade to 3.6K, which is kind of annoying. I don't really understand why that is the case. You can shoot 4K 60 frames per second on 360, but you can't shoot 4K 60 frames per second on a single lens, which is weird. So you can see the quality here versus the quality that we had before. This is the single lens versus the 360 where it's shooting with both. So yeah, obviously there are constraints and issues with being able to do both at the same time, as in shoot both lenses. But yeah, I hope that maybe in a next product they can resolve that. There's also this interesting mode called FOV plus, which is, I'm guessing, field of view plus. You can only shoot in 2.7K up to 60 frames per second. I'm not entirely sure what this is used for. I think maybe just a wider view, maybe? I don't know. But yeah, you can only shoot that on the single lens. I'm not really sure. I switched to default field of view, 4K, and it looked roughly the same in terms of the actual, what's it called? The actual field of view. So I'm not entirely sure what that means.
Something that's interesting here is for the photos that it takes 72 megapixel or up to 72 megapixel photos, and you can use the 360 mode or you can animate it as well. So it gives you some defaults as well. So if you look at some of these presets here, you can set this and then play it, and so you can view what this actually looks like when you play it. There we go. Here's this preset here and just a preview of what that would look like. So it is cool that you can do something like this and use sort of the default things that they have out of the box and make it something so that you don't have to really touch it. But I think you have to look at these and see what makes sense to do with it, because most of what I've seen with this is that it's just not great quality in terms of like the dynamic range of this. It's not a very big sensor. So, you know, GoPros really aren't the greatest at taking photos, and neither is this Insta360 X3. But this is a cool option to have. if you're able to take a cool picture like this. But these presets aren't super great. But you can also animate it yourself too. So you can do this, and then you can make it go this way, and then it'll automatically transition. You can click in the middle here also to do a specific kind of fade in, fade out. So it changes the way that the motion does it. So you can see here that it sort of goes a little bit slow and then switches to it. And then you can use these keyframes here. And it ends up, again, being fairly complicated. So like what I would do here is maybe switch it from that. So you're basically switching from that to this. So you can get some interesting things out of this and customize this in the apps. So I like that you have the ability to do all these things. It's just tough to know because you're just learning a brand new system. So it also takes HDR photos, which is nice. I would probably recommend this mostly because you can see sort of the differences between the two. This one, there's quite a bit of shadows here. It shows in the bottom left corner here what photos it took, and then what it's like kind of stitching together. So you can see that it's kind of just trying to match the two different dynamic ranges here. And then you can animate this again, and then choose like something that's just standard, and then use that. So that's a pretty cool thing to have. And again, it's very customizable and very, very much something that to play around with. But again, if you just want to take a photo, and if you just want to take a video straight up of the thing that you're looking at, going for any of the action cameras are probably a better fit than a 360 camera. But this allows you to be very, very versatile. So if you do want that customization, then I would say this is something that is more for you. Here's a little shot from the time-lapse mode, so enjoy. Honestly, thinking about a 360 camera in general, I think they're very, very versatile. As I've mentioned, they have multi-purposes. I think when using my GoPro and walking through the woods on a hike, it's just so much easier to capture what you're looking to capture. Now, if you're somebody that has walked around, captured something, and has thought a bunch of times that I wish I would have captured this or this angle, so on and so forth, then probably a 360 camera works for you. What I've noticed, and I've been using the new X4 for quite some time now too as my main action camera, is that there are only certain use cases where I think it's very, very much worth it. For example, if you plan to have two angles, one facing out, one facing in, or car reviews in the daylight, which I've noticed are really, really helpful to have a 360 camera so that you're just recording once and you can essentially stitch or move to one side or face outwards, so on and so forth. It also allows you to be very, very smooth with some shots as well. So there are some benefits to it and a workflow that can work for you. I think the main issue, again, is messing around with the keyframes when you're trying to export something. So you don't just get a video that's facing forward and a video that's facing backwards. You actually have to export a video file, select what sizing you want for it and what bitrate, and wait for it to export. So it's not like just, off of a GoPro or any of these other action cameras, you just pull off the footage that you took video of and then you put it into Final Cut or whatever video editing software you want. You actually have to edit at that point and export into your timeline into Final Cut what you want to use. So I've heard some people exporting the front view and then the back view and then sort of putting that in the timeline and then stitching it all together. Depending on how long the video is, it ends up taking 30 minutes to export. So also depending on what bitrate you export at, because I've been exporting it at 200 megabits and it takes a long time to export a video, and then the size is quite large. Like I've exported 30 gigabyte files, and it's just tough to think about exporting that and adding that to the time. So versus, just taking a footage with the GoPro and using that footage. The other thing that I noticed is that the 360 view or shoot or recording setting that you shoot at is actually better than the 4K single lens version that you shoot at, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I understand that they're stitching it together, but that's a little bit strange. It should be a better quality with just a single lens, and then it would just overlap into an action camera, and it would actually just make no sense to not use or not buy a 360 camera. And I think I can still use it to that degree, but the footage coming out of the 4K just single lens mode is just not as good as, shooting directly out of the 8K mode, which it should be just as good, but from what I've seen, it just hasn't been. But with that said, again, I definitely would recommend these cameras. And I definitely recommend like the newer version, the X4, just because it can shoot in 8K. The other thing is that in the HDR mode, it does capture a lot better of like certain, sometimes it just gets better video, and it captures in like if you're in a specific setting, like I've done this for my full self-driving videos, is that it captures a lot of what you can see outside, but the quality ends up being much worse. So what I wish Insta360 would implement is an 8K HDR video mode. But yeah, again, a good camera. For the price, it's tough not to think about getting these, because you can essentially use this in place of 2 action cameras. So yeah, I definitely recommend it, but again, there is a learning curve with the software and what have you. So if you're not willing to do that, just stick with traditional action cameras. And yeah, let me know in the comments what you think, and we will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.